Today I want to do just a quick overview of CSS Concepts. If you want to follow along or you're watching the recording later and you want to follow along, I'm using this Unit 3 CSS start file. It has just some documents in it that I created, and you can use that as a starting point. I'm just going to use it for some quick examples, and then most of the work will be done by you in a jigsaw. I've already downloaded that, and I renamed it CSS or Unit 3 CSS done so I can get to it later. And this is what's hiding inside there. That's not what's hiding inside there. This is what's inside there. Now, a couple things that I want to mention. Before I dig into the CSS is notice the naming standards here. I've seen a lot of you with image folders with a capital I, etc. I recommend you stick to lowercase or at least camelback on these things, and notice I'm sticking to lowercase with very simple names. It doesn't make a lot of difference in this class. However, I will be grading your assignments for capitalization, because if you ever post this website on a server someplace, it's probably going to be a Linux server. And when we run Apache, we're running Apache in a Windows environment, and Windows is not case sensitive, but many web servers like my Fat Cow site are Linux servers, and they are case sensitive. And there's nothing more painful than going through a monster-sized site and changing the capitalization in all the different locations wherever you reference something haphazardly. To make life easier, I usually name everything lowercase, including my images in here, but this is a borrowed site, so there may be some images that aren't lowercase. Looks like those are pretty much lowercase. Okay. And same thing with the site pages. Everything's lowercase. If you choose a different capitalization scheme, that's absolutely fine. The reason I make them lowercase, I don't have to remember what's capitalized and what's not, so I just make everything lowercase. But you can camelback them, you can capitalize them however you want. I believe I didn't take any points off on your assignments if you turned in images folders with capital I's, but my advice, make it lowercase. This site that I'm looking at here is actually jumping ahead a little bit, because the site includes multiple pages, and it will use it later, I believe in Unit 4, the next unit, to link these pages together and learn how that works. Okay. Also, there's an images folder here. As Justin found out, when you're trying to refer to these images that are inside an images folder, the only path you have to provide is from the file that you're working on. So I'm working on index. You use what's called a relative path, and we'll talk about this a lot more in the next unit. You use the relative path. If this is the page you're on, how do you get to the image? I can see the images folder. Inside there's a Beethoven images or an MLV picture with a JPEG file. So you don't have to say, and this is where Justin got caught, it's on my F drive, in my web programming folder, in my Unit 2 folder, in my images folder. The F drive makes no sense, because when you post that on a server, it's not going to be an F drive. So you always use relative locations. That way, when you transfer these websites to a different location, a different drive, you turn it into me. When Justin turned his website into me, it said, go to the F drive. I don't have anything in my F drive. And I showed his page and got the empty little broken box saying, I can't find your picture. If you use the relative addressing instead, keep track of where you are. I'm on the index page. I can see the images folder in the same folder that I'm in. So all you have to say is images / and then the image name. I'm not requiring any of these subfolders until the next unit, Unit 4. If you want to use an image folder, you can. It's a good idea, and we'll get there. But if you do that, make sure you reference those images properly. I'm going to be messing with just the index file here. And somewhere I have Notepad++. There it is. I'm going to bring that in here. And I didn't put all the fun stuff up at the top here with all the meta tags and keywords and stuff. You guys know how to do that. But notice also the indentation here. All right. And some of these I'm not real happy with. So this is, again, a borrowed site. If this was my site, this is how I would indent the paragraphs. If the paragraph marker ends on a different line than it starts, my advice is indent. Here's the beginning, here's the end. You know how I am about curly brackets. Here's the beginning, here's the end. Mark them so they're very easy to find. Expression Web likes this technique where they don't take up an extra line just for the end paragraph marker. But it also tends to get lost sometimes. Right. So I'm a big believer that if it's not on the same line, notice this one here, the P tag and the end P tag are on the same line. That's cool. Right. Because if I don't see a P tag underneath and I don't see indentation, I assume I'm going to find that end marker on the same line. If I don't, then it's a struggle to find it. The A tag, here's another one. We haven't talked about A tags. That's a link. Right, we'll talk about that in the next unit, but it also has an end tags on the same line. The OL and the end OL on different lines, indented in between. List items are short, so they're on separate lines. I'm surprised all those links are still there. I gotta yank those out. So again, this is a paragraph. It's over multiple lines, so I'm gonna split it so that it looks like this. Another thing, who did I catch on that one? I don't remember, but somebody went scrolling over here about 32 inches worth of monitor wide. Had Notepad, must have had Notepad++ open in a 32-inch monitor, and the text just went on and on and on. What's the limit? I don't know, maybe 80, 90 characters, something like that. But the longer you make your lines, the more I have to scroll, and the more the maintenance programmer then would have to scroll to find out, is there really an end tag on the end of this 5,000 character line? I don't recommend that. Set your screen size. There may be, I think there was a way, I've forgotten where it is, in Notepad to say, draw me a line at about 80 characters. It's just a gray line. It's a guideline. And if you exceed that, then you can assume that somebody else is going to have to scroll to see more than that.
There was a ruler I found in there somewhere, and I forget.
In Notepad++. Yeah, you can put a ruler in to see, but there's also, I seem to remember there was, maybe it's a different, I've seen so many of these HTML editors, I forget which one's which. But I thought there was a shaded gray line that you could put in here. Maybe when you guys are doing your jigsaw, I'll try to find it. Don't spend your time finding it now, I'll dig it out. But you can show that on the screen, and if you spill over it, then you start getting a little nervous. But it makes maintenance of these a lot easier. Notice I'm also using white space. Some of you have indented like this, where the H3 is kind of a header, and this is part of my H3 section, and so is this, so I'm going to indent those to show they're part of that H3, and that's okay. But it's not necessary. Here's my beginning, here's my end H3. In programming, I've pretty much taught you that once it ends, you indent at the same level underneath it. I believe it was Brandon who asked me, do I have to indent the head tags because they're really part of the HTML tag? You don't have to. I understand that, but it's very common to see the head tag at the left margin just so it isn't taking up more indentation, and the body tag at the left margin just so it isn't adding one more level of indentation to worry about. If it's clean, relatively easy to read, I'm good. But my advice is if your tags end on separate lines, make it very obvious where the end tag is so that I can see it and indent everything in between. If you don't like the extra line here in the paragraph, I could probably sneak this one up there, and it still looks pretty easy to find the beginning and the end. It's like everything else in programming. When you develop these things, you have to be thinking about the maintenance programmer because they're going to have to read this, and scrolling and tags that are hidden. And when you validate, some of you have done that, you validated and you get errors and you can't find them. What's it talking about? Others, for some reason, the validator's letting them go. I don't know where that's coming from. To me, if there's an open tag, there better be an end tag. And I think one of your notes someplace said that future versions of the validator, future versions of HTML5, if you open a tag, you got to close it. You can't count on the browser doing that for you. I think right now the paragraph tag is a little lenient. Right? And what happens if I don't put this H3 tag in here? Does it figure out that the H3 tag's done because here's a paragraph tag? Maybe. I wouldn't count on it if I were you. I'd end them. I'm going to be looking for that. All right. Our goal in this unit, let me switch back to the notes here real quick. Our goal in this unit is to talk about CSS. As your websites get more complex, as your pages get more complex, you're going to want consistent formatting. If you go through my website, you'll see that every page looks very, very similar. There's a few exceptions here and there. Those are old ones that haven't been worth it to me to update them. I try to make all my pages look very much the same. They have the same formatting, the same fonts, the same background colors, the same menu colors, etc. Doing that and then later changing it gets to be a real chore if you've got, and my website probably is a 100 web page website, and if you decide that, all right, my menu, I don't want it to be maroon anymore, I want it to be purple. Changing that on 100 pages is a real pain. So what has been around for a long time is CSS, Cascading Style Sheets is what that stands for. The sheet part of it is old. What we're really talking about here is cascading styles. What we're doing with CSS is separating the style from the content. The purists would say, when I look at your body tag, I shouldn't see any styles in there at all. Those are the purists. I'm not 100% pure. Sometimes I break that rule. If this is one thing here and I want the text color to change, I'm just going to change it right there. The purists would say everything goes into a CSS tag or an external CSS file that we're going to talk about here today yet. Everything goes into one of those files and period. That's it. If you want to change it, you go find it in the CSS. As you'll see today, there are 3 levels of styles, and there are inline styles that are embedded right inside of a tag. There are embedded styles that are inside the page. And then finally, there are external styles that are in a file all their own. Justin, you're going to ask a question, make a comment?
Oh, good.
Okay.
I've decided just to wait.
Just to wait, see if I get there, right? There is a validator for CSS. The validator, however, only applies to CSS external files. Because if you try to validate an HTML page, it'll choke on it with all the HTML because that shouldn't be in a CSS file. So this is used for external files. Another good reason for using external CSS is you can validate it to make sure it's all cool. I will be validating running through your CSS files, external files through the validator when you turn them in. So as I mentioned, 3 different levels: inline, embedded, and external. And I want to cover each one of those so you can get an idea where they come from. As a couple of you have discovered, there are many deprecated attributes. Now there's a term that we haven't talked too much about. I probably should have talked about it in the Unit 2 overview. What's an attribute? An attribute is a change or a further clarification of a tag. Source in an image tag is an attribute. Alt is an attribute. Style is an attribute. When HTML first came out, attributes were used for formatting. Right? You could say something like a line equals center. It would center it. Most of that has gone away now. Attributes are used to provide more information about a tag, not to format it, to change its appearance. That's what styles are for now. Okay. Width is kind of a funky one, particularly on images. Height and width, those are attributes. How big on the screen is this going to be? There are also height and width styles. They just have a different effect. If you're talking about an image, the height and the width should be specified as attributes. And as many of you have also discovered, the height and the width should match the size of your image exactly. If you specify, and I'm kind of getting into your own lessons, you may have talked about this, so I just want to make sure it's clear. If you specify a height and a width inside the attribute, your page will load faster, because the browser will see that and it will reserve a space that's 91 pixels wide by 120 pixels deep for your picture, and then wrap text around it, if appropriate. Then at a certain point, it'll start bringing the images in, and if the images are the same size, everything's cool. We don't have to re-render the rest of that page. If you don't specify a height and a width, that makes it even tougher on the browser, because then it doesn't know how much room to save for that image, and it has to wait until it actually loads the image in. And some of your images could be quite large, and that would be painful. So by specifying a height and a width, your images load faster. Again, today, with today's internet download speeds, fast loading pages are not as critical as they used to be. But if you've got a very full page full of lots of fancy images, the faster that page loads, the more likely somebody's going to stay. You ever been to a website, loads and loads and loads, and you go forget it. You move on someplace else. It's the last thing you want if you're the one creating the website. So our standard is every picture has a height and a width, and they match the image exactly. If your image is too big, then use the drawing program, paint.net, Photoshop, whatever, resize it to the size you think you want it to be until it's appropriate for your website. If you want the same image on the same page 3 times in different sizes, then this makes sense. But our standards, in most cases, I want the image, the height and width designated, and it has to match. So I'll be checking for that. And of course, this I believe is a standard. And it's an HTML5 catch. If you don't put an alt tag in an image with an alternate tag there, that will throw a fit. If your image doesn't exist, this appears, but even more importantly, this appears when you hover over it, and that's not even more importantly. And I don't think that's the case anymore. It's the title attribute that appears when you hover. What the alt is used for is for readers, web page readers. There are a lot of people who can't see who visit your website. Hard to imagine. They have readers, special software that reads the page. And when they hit an image, it reads your alternate text. So that they can't see the picture, but they can see that included in this web page is a picture of Beethoven. So your alt tag should be fairly descriptive of the image. I have read now in multiple books that if all your picture is a bullet, like you'll see on my websites, there's all these yellow diamonds all over the place. Do I put a yellow diamond alt tag on every one of those so somebody knows? No. In that case, I have the alt tag, but it's an empty string. That tells the reader it's not important, it's a picture, but it's not important. Ignore it. So for things like bullets or stuff that's not important, that should be fairly rare. You can leave that blank, but you must always have an alt tag. Got sidetracked. Inline styles. Let's see what this page looks like real quick. And now I got to put it in here. That'll do. Oops. I just put it on OneDrive. Not what I meant to do. Here's what the page looks like. Kind of like yours right now, right? Except for the links. Should take those out. Pretty boring. Black text, image. In this unit, we're going to learn to spruce this up a little bit. I can't wait to see some of your resumes spruced up. Okay. By the way, your resumes, first time I see them, I will also give you resume comments if I think about it. Okay. But after that, if you want resume comments, feel free to ask. Okay. But hopefully you're implementing a lot of the suggestions I'm making, but second time around, I'm looking at the HTML, etc., not your resume, unless something just jumps out at me. If you want resume advice, I can give you that as well. But that's all it is advice, and that's why I stop after the first time, because if you choose not to take it, that's your choice. But if you want me to give you comments on the resume again, ask. So here we are, I want to spruce this up a bit. Let's just start with this overview. Let's say that would look better if it was centered. I don't want to give too much away here because you're going to be doing some research on all kinds of different styles. So here's my overview. If I want to center that in line, I have to tell the H3 tag that you are going to be styled differently. By default, the H3 tag is a certain size, 14 or whatever it is. It's black, so on. To create an inline style, I just type the word style equals, and then in quotation marks, put the styles. You can have as many styles in here as you want. I can change the color, I can change the alignment, I can change the font size, I can change the font, I can do all kinds of stuff to this. If it's that complex, I don't recommend doing it inline. If it's relatively simple, inline's not bad. The purists would say, this is bad news, don't do it. In between the quotes, you put the style. You have to know the style tags. That's part of the style names. That's what you're going to be learning in the jigsaw this time around. There's one called text-align, then a colon, and which of the options do you want to implement here? Center. Right. Notepad++ helps you a little bit, but it lies sometimes too. That's why you're going to have to do the research here. When you do the research, if you're assigned text align, you should be giving me all the options and explaining to me what those options do. If I save that, come back to the image, that's not in there, it's in here, and hit F5, now it's sent. And there are all kinds of these attributes. That's an example of an inline style. I use those sparingly, usually to change the color of one object. Maybe it's one line on a page that I want centered, but a centered piece of text, that's not a bad style to have embedded or even better external. And you just say this is style equals centered. Simplify, not style equals, class equals centered. We'll see here in a second. That's common, they're going to use it a lot. But if for some goofy reason I want this piece of text to have a teal background with a purple text for whatever reason, and it's the only piece of text I'm going to have like that in my entire website, I might just put it in line. If I then decide to use that in 3 or 4 or 5 different places, then I'll move it and reuse it. That's an inline style. Take it back out. Just make sure that, make sure that this change sticks so we can see it. Okay. Now the alternative, this is an important line, it just kind of gets hidden. Okay? Inline styles override embedded styles, override external styles. Let's talk about that a little bit. External styles can be used anywhere in your website. So imagine my website, 100 pages, and I have a style that says make the menu maroon. I put that in one place, and I link all the pages to it, external style. It's separate from my web page. I have to link into it. We'll learn how to do that here in just a bit. Okay. That's an external style. An embedded style is inside your page. That's what I'm going to show you how to do next. It's actually in this page. It's a style that's defined inside this page. But what if I have in the external color equals maroon, and on the internal I have colored equals red? Then the red applies because it's closer to what it is I'm editing. This is external, this is internal, embedded. Right? And finally, what if later on I say this would normally be maroon, I've changed my mind, I want it to be pink. If it's in line, that overrides all the other ones. So if you have a style with the same name, we're going to see here in just a second that, let's do it. I can create a style that's embedded. Okay? An embedded style goes in your head tag. You start with a style tag that tells what kind of style, it's always text CSS, and an end style. So let's put that in here. Where it goes in here doesn't matter. I like to put it at the end so it's easy to find. Actually, I don't have too many of them in here. Embedded to me is a weird compromise between outside where everybody can use it and right here on this one little place. I don't have too many styles that apply to this one page only, and the rest of the website should ignore it. I don't have many of those. So I don't do this too often, but you might see it. And if you're using Expression Web, I got a sneaking suspicion that some of you have started using Expression Web already. Right? If you use Expression Web, this is where it puts them. It's embedded. So style, it's a tag. Style equals, where did I always forget this. That's why I'll tell you how much I use it. Type equals text CSS. Type equals text/CSS. And then there's an end style. And in between, I put all my styles. There are lots of different ways to designate styles. One of the easiest and most common is to use a tag. There's an H3 tag out there, right? This says, anytime you find an H3 tag, curly brackets around it, text, align, center, semicolon. What I didn't mention on the inline styles is what if I want to change the background color and the foreground color? That's two styles in one. You separate them with semicolons. Okay. If you're using embedded or external styles, the style definition for H3 has to be designated with curly brackets. If you're doing 2, 3, 4, 5 different style changes, I start putting them on separate lines. My curly brackets line up and all kinds of good stuff. You want your styles to be readable as well. So now if I did that right, notice the H3 is followed by a colon. I don't think that belongs. Let's check my notes here real quick. H3 is not followed by a colon. It's just H3 and then curly brackets. Here's what gets applied to all your H3s. Save it. And this one, this page has an H3 here. I think that's an H3. That's it. So both of them should not be affected by this. There they go. But just a minute ago, I said that H3 or that inline styles override those. So if I now come down to this H3 and say, you know what, I think I want your text align using style equals text align. Notice the tag, the style name, is the same. And the designation is the same, center or right or left or whatever I want it to be. I'm giving away all my text align secrets here. This says in the entire page, any H3, center. This one says, yeah, not this one. Override it for this bit. Save it. F5. And now that one's moved to the right. So the inline style, the closer you are to the tag, that's the one that applies most. If you have these overlapping styles. I could now go do an external style and say H3s are all centered. And then in this page say, no, I want them left, except for this one that I want right, inline. You can mix and match those, and the closer you are to the tag, that overrides the others.
If you put an inline style, if you change its color, does that mean that it ignores the embedded style to align it?
No. It only the style, okay, his question for the recording is if I now go in here and change the color, right, to something else, does that wipe out this H3 up here because I changed the H3? No. It's on a style by style basis. This is the text align style that's applied to every single one down there. Changing the color does not affect the text align. So that's a good question though. And this is not the style for all H3s and everything else has to be the default value. No. This just says on this page H3s are centered. Whatever else you do to them, that's fine. If I change the color externally to blue, they'll still be blue in here. They'll just be centered and blue. And changing it inline doesn't affect anything. Any tags you don't touch are unchanged. Where to go? There. Okay. So that's how you do embedded ones. And you can just create a whole bunch here. So I could say that, what else do I want to say here? Let's just do this. Horizontal rules have a width of 80%. Saved it. Now these horizontal rules are going all the way across the page, but not anymore. So you can put as many of them in here as you want. Just give each one a name, each one its own set of curly brackets, and change whatever it is that you want to change. In addition to using these tags, you can also create what are called named styles. And questions about these tag names. So I could put P's in here, right? List items. Careful with list items because they're list items that are all the way, and it gets more complicated than that. We can have list items that are only inside of ordered lists. So you'd say something like this, an ordered list item. Just put them together like that. If you want the same style to apply to two different things, you put commas in between. It gets complicated quickly. Can get complicated quickly. I'm not a big fan of this comma stuff because it kind of hides that H2. If I'm looking for it, I see H3, oh, look, there's a comma with an H2, almost missed that. This style of list item only applies to ordered lists, doesn't apply to unordered lists. So you can nest these things if that's what you need to do. Here's a comma for both. Right? And applying, how do we use these embedded styles? You don't have to do anything. All H3s are automatically affected, done. All horizontal rules automatically affected. You don't have to do anything special to those H3s. Sometimes though, you want to create a named style. A style that you can use over and over and over again and in different kinds of tags. So as an example of that one, let's do this. Let's create a style called shaded, and I'll call it shaded gray. This is a name that I have made up. Right, there's no tag called shaded gray. It's a style that I have made up. I've called it whatever I want. Again, I'll use all lowercase. I don't usually get too elaborate. And you have to precede it with a dot. That's what makes it a named style. Curly bracket, I'll do the background color, colon, light gray. Don't do that with an A, it won't work. I recommend you put semicolons at the end of these. It's like C#. If you don't continue on, you don't need the semicolon. So you don't need a semicolon after the last one. But it makes adding things to this easy. You just click at the end of the semicolon, add another style. So I put semicolons after all of them. If there's more than one here, then you must have that semicolon. The only place you don't need one's on the last style. I even put it there because it makes it easier to add stuff later. So now I have that name. And you can define as many of these as you want. These are the ones that are most common. Right. These are pretty common, but these are most common because you define it yourself and you can apply it wherever you want. How do I apply it? By going into the tag that you want to apply this to and designating the class, and then use your named style. That was Notepad++ saying, I got this thing called shaded gray. Is that what you want? Yep, just punched it in there. Notepad++ helping us out. So this is a named style. To use the named style, you have to put a class equals attribute in here, and that's it. Okay. You can apply multiple classes to the same object, but what most people will do is define a style that combines those. But there's all kinds of flexibility here. I can't get into all of it. You'll see some of it, some of you will use some of it, you'll get some research out of it, but this gives you the overview. What I'm interested in here is inline embedded versus external. So let's see that at work. Save it. I change the background color of this first H3, and now it's gray. If I want to, I can apply that shaded gray to something else. So here's Ludwig's name, but how do I apply it to just a piece of a paragraph? Experts.
Put a style tag on each side.
Nope, can't put a style tag on it.
Put a div around it.
Put a div around it, maybe. It's not a division of my page though.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
How do I shade just that piece, just Ludwig's name?
How do you shade it?
Yeah, well, how do I designate that I want this to be, how do I pull that out and say I want this to be just red if I were to say that? Span tag. There's also a section tab, but this isn't a section. Those new tags, div, section, right, they're supposed to describe your document. This is a section of my document. You can have multiple sections in your document. The div tag is a division of your page. Those are slowly going away because of the new section tags and stuff. Very few, a lot less div tags than there were in the past. But if you want a piece of a paragraph or a piece of a list item even, you span it. So I put a span tag around this. And what that span tag allows me to do is apply a style to just that
You forgot
piece.
the closing sign.
Thank you. Just that piece. So in here, I once again do the class equals shaded gray. And now that style, that's what the span is for. That style applies only to this beginning, anything between the beginning and the end. And yes, that can cover multiple lines and multiple paragraphs if that's what you want. But its span is typically used for just small pieces of text that you want to format differently. You could use bold or strong or italics if that's what you're doing. But if you're changing the color, the only way to do that now is with a style. The only way to apply a style to a small piece of text is span. If it's more than multiple lines or multiple paragraphs, then maybe a div or a section is more appropriate. And so now I expect Ludwig's name here to be shaded gray as well. So it's a named style, and I can use it over and over and over again. As often as I want on a page. For that matter, if I put it in an external style sheet, I can use it on multiple pages. Another type of style that you can create is an ID style. It starts with the hashtag or pound sign and then a name. So I'm going to say this is my title style, and I'm going to change the color to maroon. So it's very similar to the named style, but this one's an ID, and you put a pound sign in front of it. Any one of your objects on your page, you can give it an ID. It's kind of like giving it a variable name. And we will be using the IDs in JavaScript, as a matter of fact. So IDs will become very comfortable to you very soon here. But you can also use the IDs as a target for a style. So if I want this ID, this style, to be applied to this header, I can ID it. ID equals title. Has to have the same name as what's after the hashtag. Notice when you put in the class command and when you put in the IDs, you don't put the dots in the names. Those are not part of the names. It just designates the type of style they are. I call these name styles. This is an ID style. Here's my ID. How many variables can you have with the same name on the same page? One, right? I can't have duplicate titles in a page. I can't do it. Can't have two items with the same ID. If you run that through the validator, it should get a message. Even if you don't, it's a bad idea, because as soon as you start writing JavaScript and say, go to my ID tag and do something with it, my title tag, which one? I can't do it. So the ID tag is only applied to one, or the ID type style is only applied to one object on the page. In the future, you'll develop a header for your pages, and you'll put it in a div or a section. Or you'll put it in a header tag. I think there's a header tag now. I'm pretty sure there is in HTML5. You'll put it in there and you'll ID it as the header, and then you create one header style. You put it in an external file, and every ID thing that's named header on every single page gets the same style. That can be pretty powerful, but what you have to recognize here is that this style will only be applied to one object on the page, the one with that ID. But then in my website, I could have 20, 50, 200 pages. Every page has a title, has an ID title on it someplace, and that way they all get formatted the same way. Now that's maroon. Now all of these movements have Beethoven's pictures. They all have these H3s. They all have a title. What if I want to apply the same styles to all of them? I could easily just highlight this, copy, paste it into all my other pages, right? Yes, but then I have 5, 6, 10, 200 copies of that, and if I change one, now I got to change all of them or highlight them again and go paste it into 200 places again, and I don't want to do that. So what we do instead is create an external style file that is not inside this document at all, and then simply link it to this document. What I'm going to do is cut my styles because I'm going to reuse these. So I'm going to cut them from there. And now I have no styles. I'm also going to my notes because I always forget how to do this. Here's the external style sheets. Okay. The external style sheet contains the same descriptions, the same kind of stuff, but it doesn't include the style tag because it's an external style sheet. We know it's a style sheet. So all it has in it are these style designations. So I'm going to create a brand new file. And I'm going to paste those cut styles in here. And then I'm going to remove my style tag because there's no tags in here. These are just styles. That's all you put in here. And as soon as I save that as a CSS file, it'll apply the formatting. But the notepad syntax highlighting. But before I do that, I'm going to create a place to put it. There is no rule that says your CSS pages have to go inside of CSS folders. I can put them anywhere. I can put it here. I can put it in there. It might be stupid to put it in the images folder. But what I normally do is create a folder for all my CSS. And then I can find it. Inside there, you could have multiple subfolders. Inside there, you can do whatever you want. But now what I'm going to do is save this document into there. Save it. Where? In my CSS folder, what do you want to call this? I like to put the title of the section or the website or something. This is my Beethoven CSS file. You can have as many of them as you want. But I often will have a CSS file for my site, and I give it my site name somehow. And that way I can put those things in there, but I can still have separate ones. Save it, and now Notepad goes, oh, it's a CSS file. Well, then let me color these for you, and off it goes. How to organize these is another whole new conversation that I still haven't quite figured out. I like to put all my tag name styles at the top, then my name styles, and then finally my ID styles. And I lump them all together so all the dots are together and all the pound signs are together. Because if I'm looking at the page now, and I say use the class shaded gray, where's shaded gray defined? It must be in a CSS file because it's not in here, so it must be external. So then I look at this line, which is going to be the link command. Let's take a look at that. We put a link in that says link with an href. That's an HTML reference. Okay. And this file name. Then the rel style sheet, type text CSS, that all has to be pretty much the same. So let's see how quickly I can copy that. Actually, I might be able to steal it. Probably be ugly when I paste it, if I can even steal it. Darn PDFs. Okay. Paste. Didn't work. Okay, so I'm going to put in a link here. href equals. That href will become familiar to you in the next unit because it's also used for linking, okay, for creating links. Href equals, and now I have to tell it where to find my CSS file. Again, relative. I'm in the index page. Notice, there it is. I'm in the index page. To find the CSS file, you first go into the CSS folder, and there you will find Beethoven.css, and the extension is important. So first go to the CSS folder. Then you'll find Beethoven.css. And that's how you create these things when they're embedded inside of folders. We'll talk about it more in the next unit, because with linking, it's even more of a factor. Okay, and then there was this other stuff, which is rel style sheet. These are left over from the old days of HTML, but they still need to be there. They haven't removed them in HTML5. Type equals text CSS. It's a one-sided tag. A link links to it. Text CSS type equals rel style sheet. So this is how you link this page to that external CSS, and yes, you can link 3, 4 CSS files into here. Justin?
Does it still need to be in between the style tags?
It still needs to be in the head tag, but no, it is not in a style tag. In my notes, it shows a style tag. Okay. It shows a style tag because you can have embedded styles and external styles and inline styles all on the same page. I rarely, if ever, do this. I have lots of external styles. And then if I need something specific for this element right here, I'll inline it. But I don't use the embedded ones very often. I don't remember from the homework assignment I asked you to put some embedded ones in there. Just approach me, you can do it. If I do, okay, throw it in there, and then later on I usually yank it, do what I just did, put it in the external style sheet. And so now if I'm on this page and said, oh, I don't like this shade of gray, I want to make it darker or lighter or something like that. Okay. It's called shaded gray. It must be in this Beethoven file. So I open it up. There it is. Now I can go in here and change it. By changing it here, it's linked to the other page. I'm changing it there.
What happens if you have an HTML file that's linked to multiple CSS files? How would you know where shaded gray is at?
I don't.
Just look at.
That's right. His question for the recording is, what if they're linked to 3 or 4 CSS files? How do I know which one contains this? I don't. I'd have to look through all of them to find it. There's one, again, when it comes to HTML, what are the strategies? And the CSS, what are the strategies? If I have 6, 10 CSS files, I'm looking for something, boy, that could be fun to find, right? Well, maybe you combine them all into one. But then you've got this CSS files like this, and I still can't find anything in it because it's huge. So you can put comments in. By the way, in CSS, comments use the CS or the C# style. And I could then in my HTML, somewhere around here, designate where this is. But you get a lot of comments out there just to find out where all these things are. It sounds hard. It's not usually 10. It's 1, 2, 3 maybe. So you're not looking around a lot. It's your website. You probably know where it is. If it's not your website, it will become yours once you get familiar with it. You'll know where the styles are for certain things. So did that work? Here's the danger. I'm now messing with multiple files. You want to make sure you save all. So I've changed this. I've changed that. Make sure you change them all or save them all. And then come over here and refresh. And what do I expect to happen? Nothing, because I transferred every single style that I had defined internally to my external sheet. Refresh. Except I changed, forgot about that part. I made it darker, and it did, but notice this is still maroon. Right, and that's your test. This is still maroon. The only way that would happen is if it did link to my CSS file. So the external CSS files look like CSS that was embedded without the style tags. Put style tags in here, you get errors. This is the one that you can run through the validator to make sure that you've used the right names, to make sure you get semicolons in the right places, curly brackets in the right places, and so on. This has an H3 center in it. If I go to the index and create a style tag in here and say, no, H3s are right, then on this page they'll be aligned to the right, because the embedded styles override the other ones. What if I have conflicting files in my linked CSS? I have 2 names shaded gray. Now you got a problem. Which one's it going to apply? Good luck. You could try moving your links around, say this one's first and then this one. It'll probably take the second one because the second one will override the first one. But that's not a really good idea. We can combine them. This is list items for unordered lists. We can even put dots in here. Say for paragraphs, here's a paragraph, fancy paragraph style. This style is only applied to paragraphs that are classed fancy paragraph. All kinds of things you can do with these. My hour's up. Let me answer your questions, and I'm going to turn you loose on this. And if I need, probably next week we'll talk a little bit more about some of these mixings of things. Justin?
Is it really worth it to put like p.fancy graph or just leave it that fancy paragraph and use it when you need it? Because then it's almost just like you're limiting yourself.
You are limiting yourself, and that's why you want to do it. Right.
So
This might be an embedded style, this P paragraph, P fancy paragraph. There might be an external style called fancy paragraph. Okay. But on this page, I want my fancy paragraphs to be italicized, for instance. So this will be an override. but only for fancy paragraphs that are in paragraphs, not fancy paragraphs that are used in bullet items or something. So, do you use it a lot? No. Can you use it? Yes. And you'll look at other people's CSS and they've got these bizarre combinations of things to make their pages look exactly the way they want to go. I'm not asking you to get terribly bizarre. I think I do ask you to do one of these where you combine two tags and say, I only want this applied to text that's inside of here. But yes, you are limiting yourself. Absolutely. That's the point. But you can have fancy paragraph that applies to all kinds of things, but only apply it to specific ones on this page is kind of what that's doing. Any other questions for right now? Okay, let me stop the recording.